Thank you very much, Patrick. It's great to see the butler really did do it, the introduction so generously. And I'm delighted to be here with you all today, and I'm particularly delighted to see our opponents be here today. And I'm not just talking about the weather, the potential for none of us to arrive on time, or if indeed at all, but I'm impressed and rather surprised that they've arrived, indeed, that they have to argue a case which is so absurd. Let's rephrase the case to reverse it into the negative, that the social responsibility of a business is to reduce profits, is to reduce its profits. You catch immediately the absurdity of that. It's a business's social responsibility to go broke, to sack its employees, to not pay its debts, to generally go backwards, damage investment across the economy, and indeed ultimately cut government tax revenues. A case so absurd, you might just as well argue that Roger Federer has a social responsibility to win fewer Grand Slam tournaments. You might just as well argue that a heart surgeon has a wider responsibility than simply doing a good job on your heart, but indeed perhaps carrying out a pedicure while he's doing it. A case which is so absurd in its core, but I don't really want to leave it there, because the absurdity goes much deeper than that. In the general point I'm making, of course, obviously, is that we all benefit from people sticking to their knitting, to have focus in exactly what they do best. And we can run through the run of it across the community, across business, across activities to demonstrate that. But even more fundamentally, why I'm impressed by their chutzpah, their arrogance, their courage for turning up today, is they do so after we've been given a most damning demonstration of the falsity of their argument, the global financial meltdown. Two words, Fannie and Freddie, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Two icons of imposing upon business a social responsibility, quote unquote, to ensure that unemployed car workers in Detroit get to own their own homes, or at least get to own their own homes for a little while, until they no longer can pay the mortgages, and they go broke, and the rest, as we all know, is history. The root cause of the financial meltdown is precisely denying that the intention and desirable outcomes is for a business to focus on boosting its profits. So, however well-intentioned, you might say, the saga is, in terms of broadening out from the fundamental dynamic of making a profit, however well-intentioned it might be, it ends in tears, and ended very spectacularly in tears in this case. The surface appearance, as we saw through the global financial meltdown, is they made, our opponents might well argue in rebuttal, that they were about making greater profits, but those greater profits were not built profits of substance, they were profits built on sand. And worse and more insidiously, they then interfaced with the characters on Wall Street to create more false profits, or to real bonuses paid out of those false profits, and indeed the great reckoning that we now have. What social responsibility, quote unquote, has been delivered as a consequence of all that, I ask you? Now, to be fair, our opponents will probably say they're not against profit, they only want to argue for reasonable profits, responsible profits, and indeed some sense that profit has to be accompanied by other motivations, and that they are not about denying the reality, the basis of profits. I guess I would have to say in pre-rebuttal that I would understand that they really don't understand the nature of a profit. They really don't understand the dynamic of a profit. And that's why the title was so well chosen. A business, by Milton Friedman, a business increasing its profits. This is not some sort of quasi-Marxist debate about the share of profits and labour between capital and labour. But the reality of the profit is the great clarifying dynamic. Without profit, you get no reality in terms of the proper allocation of resources. But beyond, and no capital formation, obviously, without profit. But beyond that, I say it's the great clarifying dynamic, because it is the signal which brings into the particular market that a particular business might be operating in competitors to force down that profit, to compete, to deliver products more cheaply, to deliver products more effectively, to deliver better profits, and indeed ultimately to reduce excess profitability. So the very nature of profit is that it's not simply the great clarifying dynamic in terms of directing and attracting investment and production and output, but it's a self-correcting mechanism. Provided, obviously, you let markets work. You let it happen. You let profits be accumulated. You let profits be chased. You let profits act as a signal to attract resources into some sectors of activity and away from others where profits are inadequate. So the precise injunction to the reverse, that the social responsibility of business is to make smaller profits, would be to deny that reality of that business dynamic. And once you start clouding or compromising that dynamic, you don't simply interfere with the profit-making process, you interfere with the fundamental drivers of effective activity, economic activity in the economy. As soon as a business moves away from the purity of the profit motive, you lose that self-correcting dynamic. You invite lobbyists, rent seekers and main chancers to come into this process to present other things, other ambitions as being appropriate as well as the profit motive. It is a path that leads straight to Freddie and Fannie and onto the global financial meltdown and all the damage and pain that flows from that. If I could take a slightly broader perspective briefly. Our history of civilization and of advance is built on two great dynamics. The dynamics of profit and markets working, and the Enlightenment, that great flowering of knowledge and science in the 18th century and beyond. And business has to obviously operate in the community. It has to understand those other dynamics. But the community obviously has the right to set the parameters in which any business and all business operates. But for business to modify and to seek to impose its own dynamic in terms of meeting objectives beyond the profit motive is to distort its function and to confuse the outcomes. So I would urge you both, all of you, to listen to our opponents as they pretend to present a case in rebuttal of the fundamental objective that I've outlined and our two following speakers will develop in detail. I'd ask you to listen to them sceptically, to challenge in your own minds their claims against that basic thesis that I presented you with, that profit is the great clarifying dynamic in the community and in our economy. It's a self-correcting dynamic. It actually, provided you allow markets to work, actually enables profits to be reduced. But also, I would finally say, listen to them sympathetically. They have at least been prepared to come and present themselves today.